All right.
Do you want to hit record, Mike?
Yep, we are all set. Thanks.
Okay, we'll call the February 15th, 2021 Parks and Recreation Committee meeting to order. I'm starting with the roll call vote. We have Mike Axon,
Yes.
staff, and myself, Sarah Francois, Sarah Borkert.
Here.
Jennifer Bonte.
Here.
Jed Henry.
Here.
And Melissa Hins.
Here.
And I don't know, is somebody on the phone with that? Is someone also dialed in on their phone?
Yes, we do have somebody here via phone. I'm not sure who that is.
Okay. So we have no Pledge of Allegiance because we don't have a flag on display. So we'll move to public comment. This is an opportunity for anyone to address the committee on any issue either on or not on the current agenda. Please observe the time limit of 3 minutes. While the committee encourages input from residents, it may not discuss or act on any issue that is not duly noticed on the agenda. Any comments, Mike?
I do not have any.
All right, then we'll move to reports. For myself, I don't have any reports for today. Committee members?
Nothing for me.
No.
Okay, then we move to you, Mike, Parks and Recreation Director report.
We'll just say it was all because of the cold. No one had anything to talk about, right?
Right.
Just from me, my report, I actually have a report here too. I'll try and share it once to kind of get rolling here. Can everyone see that or
No.
Okay, hold on 1 second. I'm gonna have to. Oh, doesn't want to do that either. All right, I'll just read it to you. I'll pass it. I'll put it in the minutes as well, so that everyone can see it later. But just a few things. Obviously, snow removal and maintenance on the ice rink, along with maintaining the cross-country ski trails, has been a big part of staff's work duties over the last month or so. We're finding it more and more challenging. The efficiencies that we've had via our public facilities department and also our parks department over the years of being able to use each other's equipment has come to the point, I think, where we need to start looking at the cost benefits and things that may come into effect of us having our own equipment and more or less just small equipment using for like boardwalk and the trail systems. I feel like we can usually wait long enough for some of the parking lots and things, but we're really struggling currently at getting all the snow removed in time as we wait for equipment to come open. Oh, sorry, someone else. So over the next few months or so, Jerry and I have been talking quite a bit about different equipment he's looking to get in the CIP, and then I've been looking to try and update that equipment based on the parks aspect of things too. So we're trying to, even if we're still purchasing those equipment, just kind of coming up with how it's going to be used and when it's going to be used, I think is going to be more important moving forward, especially as we start expanding on some of these trails and increasing the amount of the 10-foot wide trails and boardwalks that we have throughout the village. So we want to get those and get those taken care of right away. The other one is Northwest Dane Senior Services. So we entered into an agreement with them when we used their building that we would clear snow from their sidewalks and from their parking lot areas. So we try and do that, as early as we can. But if it's been snowing on nights and weekends, and so each time it does, we kind of wait to see when public facilities is done, and then we're able to come in and use that equipment. So it's just kind of obviously we're needing it at the same time that they are, so it'd be kind of an issue, but it is something we're working on. I do have the Bear Park Playground visioning session flyer all done and ready to go. I will post that. I don't think I can share that again, but I will post that again. We'll get it on Facebook. We'll send it out to everybody that's in our sportsman database. And then I'll try and do everything I can to get it over to your neighborhood, Sarah and Jed. So, and most of your neighbors are part of it. And then you can also share it with your group. I know that you have that private group for your neighborhood. So, but
I did send something out last month after we talked about that date and time, and nobody objected. I didn't hear anything one way or the other. I mean, some people said great, but so.
Perfect. Yeah, so it is Tuesday, March 16th at 6:30. And I have another page that I'm just putting together different links for people to click on and look at different catalogs. So that'll be part of that session, visioning session. Our Rec Connect program is in full speed with starting of our after school program now too. So kind of the process that we had in place for Rec Connect is still being able to be brought to the community via after school program. And we were able to work with the schools to get busing and everything set up, which was kind of a fiasco for a while, but it was finally figured out. There was a big mix-up that people couldn't, if they were picked up from a location, they had to be dropped off from that location, is what the people were telling us, the school was telling them. So we had to kind of step in and see what we could do to help that. And we were able to work through it, and it's worked out well. We currently have 12 kids signed up for the month of February. So it's been a good steady program over the last few months. We did finish up with the Love Your Neighbor event and Cupid in the Park. Thanks if any of you were able to attend or be a part of those. We just kind of talked about that, and we picked the coldest day for Cupid in the Park, coldest weeks for Cupid in the Park. So we didn't have a whole lot of hashtags out there, but we were able to use the Love Your Neighbor event for that day to kind of pick some of those people to get some of the donations that we had out as prizes. So we're going to try and collaborate with more programming, more special event type things that we're able to do, especially virtually, kind of moving forward here, as we all enjoyed it working together. And I think it'll just get better with better weather and getting people out into our parks. So look forward to that. We hope to have an Easter event that's kind of ran the same way. And then lastly, our spring and summer activity guide is planned to go out on March 22nd. We've kind of pushed the date back a little bit further now, as we should have a good clue or a better understanding of what Dane County Public Health will be doing. Once schools kind of are all back in play, we want to see what their metrics are reading and how they plan to kind of move forward with where we'll be at this summer, hopefully. So I have the actual cover of it all. We have it all done. I was going to share it with you, but it's a picture of the new playground as a sneak peek, but you'll see that in a minute. And
Is that coming out virtual? Is that coming out in hard copy and virtually?
Yes. Our plan is to still do it both for village residents. We'll all get it in their mailbox, and we'll also have it online as well. So.
Awesome.
And then the only other thing is last month we had talked about the sign going in, well, a couple of signs, but talked about the sign at Gorse Field. The village board did approve that. So they've moved forward with having staff work with the Cross Plains baseball program to come up with what they'd like for signage and or plaques. I did meet with them last week, and the plan as of right now when I left was to have the actual name of the field on the bottom of the scoreboard. So they'll go across the whole bottom there saying Gorse Memorial Field, which I thought was a really good idea. They're trying to do it local as well as we did with the scoreboard before. So they've talked with Latitude Graphics to see if there's something that they could do for us. And then also PI to see if there's something that they could do on the outside of that to kind of give it more structure. So that's kind of the plan as of right now, but that will be coming back for final approval at a date to be determined. And then they also plan to do a plaque of some sort, a bronze plaque on the backstop at some point as well. So those two things will be done. And then lastly, there's been a lot of discussion about signs. Obviously, we had approved what we hoped would be a sign in there. Since then, I've had even more discussions with people in our community and also village board members. And I've decided to put together an internal policy for our signage so that if I leave or someone comes in, there's actual conformity that everyone's been asking about and trying to keep with. And then it'll also give us kind of an outline of what our budgets will look like, or what the budget for new signage would look like in new parks, but also in our outstanding parks that we have there. So I hope to have that for you next month. I just have a couple of hangups on there of kind of what we're looking at. So, but I'll have it for you to review and or make changes to, and then Like I said, it'll just be an internal policy, but we'll send it to the village board for final approval. So, any questions?
When will registration start for the summer activities?
Like nothing's going to be really pushing. So every program that we kind of went through within that, nothing will be like have to be like that day. So we don't have an actual date for signups yet. We want to do everything at once though, so it's probably give people a good 10 or 15 days to try and figure that out. On their scheduling aspect of things. So I would say early April, like sometime in April.
And Mike, when do you start recruiting for the summer PRC positions?
Yep, we already have. Yep. So for our limited term employees, we have already sent out. So staff that would like to return are still limited term, so they're new employees each year. We always send it out to them first, and then we'll put ad in the paper, and also I think we did put one on our village website. I've gotten a few new people actually as of late for rec things. So and then we'll do interviews over spring break this year.
Our applications this year, I know in the past sometimes it was hard competing with other communities, but with job numbers down, are you seeing more applications? Does it look better?
No, and I'd actually say I don't know. From our standpoint, it tends to we tend to fluctuate, but it doesn't get the same as a full-time employee would. With the limited term stuff, a lot of kids have other sports and other jobs, so they like coming to the village to where we can work around schedules a little bit better than others. The full-time position itself, we've had one open for the public facilities department that hasn't been filled, nor we received one application to date that I know of. And that's been out for about 6 weeks, 5 or 6 weeks now. So I would say we haven't received more applications for that. We'll see within our park and rec things. We have quite a bit of turnover from year to year, or it's kind of depending on turnover from year to year on all the new employees that we'll get. Different college kids don't come back, or even some of the high school kids find better jobs at Quick Trip or other places that'll pay more. So they'll take off for those. But as of right now, I feel like we're pretty much average to where we've been in the past. So
you have most of the staff or the people who manage the programming, that's all still in place. You're just looking for the FTEs or the part-time workers, right?
Yeah, so full-time staff is still in place, but we still will look at adding part-time staff even for recreation. And that'll play a lot into what Dane County Public Health allows too, for the sizes of our program. So if we have to add more sessions and whatnot, then we'll need more staff to help or support staff for those, like we did last summer. They did increase their numbers for a number of youth settings as of right now, especially if you're able to stay outside. So where last year we were put into a childcare setting for a lot of the camps and things that we ran. So we had to have separate rooms, separate staff. They couldn't interchange, so there's a lot of those things to add to the staffing aspect. Whereas this year, as of right now, we're not in that same setting. They've moved us out. And so we'll kind of see. I mean, obviously there's still some safety precautions and things we're going to want to take into effect. But as of right now, we hopefully don't have to separate the groups as often or as much. Can stay outside more often too. So any other questions? Or
did you make any changes as far as, like, I know archery was really popular last year, and then there's the dance thing. Is the dance situation the same as it was last year?
Yeah, most likely, yes. We're still working out details with that. Miss Michelle did want to come back. She actually wanted to offer a winter program this year, and then with COVID numbers and the way they were, she just decided to back off on that. We are still in discussion with her about this summer too. So, kind of see how the Dane County Public Health, but also where the numbers are and how many vaccinations are kind of taking place too, if she's been able to be vaccinated by that time or not. But yeah, as of right now, anything that we can run, we're going to run. So it'll just be the adapt model, and that's what we run off of, through the staff. Is no matter what the program is going to run, or anything we have in our book we want to run. So how are we going to run it? Whether that be outdoors or whether that be at a different space. But we won't do another, refund type deal going into this year. So our plan is to find a way to do it.
So I know there were some things that got canceled last year, probably due to COVID, things like, for example, like the intro to fishing, and are those things back on or are the things that got cut last year staying cut?
No, and we'll talk about that a little bit here at the end of the report, but I'd like to get some more direction from you as well as, I guess, a committee, but as of right now, we're trying to just go along the Dane County Public Health recommendations or Dane County Public Health order. So what programs can we do? What are they recommending us not to do? Anything that's outdoor, we can run. Intro to fishing is, would be something we definitely would want to run. We now lost our instructor for that program as they moved up north, but there's other people out there with fly fishing background that we could try and get into. So some of the newer programs, that if they did have instructors that weren't in-house, we have in our middle group of like, how can we do these things, or can we do these things, and who would teach them? So we have them like a yes, a maybe, and then a no. And as of right now, the only no that we have is really just a no stating that we wouldn't have, and they're basically team sport type stuff that are indoors or that go to other communities as of right now. So that's kind of where we're at. But even dance is, in the maybe category, but we're definitely going to try and run something with it, just like we did last year at a minimum. But we'll kind of see. We're like our meeting on Friday with Dane County Public Health went really well, and we feel like it's definitely a point in the right direction. It's going, the numbers are all really well. It's just going to really see how what happens here with schools. Pretty much all of Dane County schools now will kind of be open in some fashion. So I think that'll obviously skew their numbers, or could skew their numbers a little bit. But at the same time, there's a lot of vaccinations taking point. So hopefully they all kind of work themselves out and we're back to somewhat of normalcy come summer. But we've already kind of understood that, like I said, we're going to try and adapt, and we know that a lot of the precautions that we put in place last year will be precautions we'll take this year. But how, are there other ways that we can do it as well to make sure that we're staying safe? So, sound good? All right.
Is that it for your report?
Yep, that is all that I have for you. Yes.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Moving to committee discussion. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, discussion. I'm sorry. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the January 20th, 2021 meeting?
I'll move to approve the minutes from January.
We have a motion to approve the January 20th meeting minutes,
I'll second.
and a second. Okay, motion passes. Number 2, Lions Legacy Project for an open air structure in H.M. Zander Community Nature Park. We have a presentation, and then followed by discussion and possible action.
All right. Yes, Andy is here with us again from Snyder and Associates. Kind of give you an overview of where they're at in regards to the shelter itself, and the feasibility of the shelter itself. And my memo was included in this, if you were able to read through that. And then also he was able to provide you with another PowerPoint presentation for this. So Andy, if you are ready, Andy and Parker is also here as well from Snyder. So I'll let you take it away, and you can kind of let me know again. I can scroll through and push down different slides if you'd like as we go through this.
All right, you got is it popped open right now? I can't see it.
It's not sharing on there.
I'm not getting it right now.
Okay, let's share. Let's try and share.
There it is.
Go.
You good? Okay.
Yep. Perfect. We can start right here. My name's Andy Meisman. I'm a landscape architect at Snyder and Associates. With me tonight is Parker Just, also from Snyder and Associates, who's working on the H&H modeling for the floodplain study here. And just to give you a kind of a project overview, we're here to provide the engineering and design services to properly plan and for the design and construction of the open air shelter in the park. The design process is pretty straightforward. We've kind of broken it down into 2 phases. The first phase would be the schematic design and concept design, where tonight we'll go over the site inventory, the hydrologic modeling, schematic design, and also just briefly look at the concept development plan and what that might include. And the second phase would be more or less the construction documentation and the drawings of the project. And really our goal here is to work with the Village of Cross Plains and any stakeholders involved in the project to create a built work that reflects the community and adds value to the park. Go to the next slide. So we really kind of have to look forward to what we're trying to accomplish here, and what that includes in this first phase of schematic design would be the ensuring we're meeting the code set up by the village, and really getting into the details here. That's the general standards applicable to all floodplain districts within the village zoning code, and in particular looking at section 85.0A, which is where it states the village shall review and permit all applications to determine whether a proposed building site will be reasonably safe from flooding. Goes on further to say all buildings are to be designed and adequately anchored to prevent flotation, collapse, or lateral movement because of any water moving across that site. And development, in this case, the shelter shall not obstruct flow or increase regional flood height due to loss of storage. So the pervious surface of the land, which is turf out there now, and putting a concrete base down for the shelter. And really what this boils down to is to issue a land permit, an H&H model must be studied and completed for the zoning administrator to approve the conditions above are met. You can go to the next slide. So I'm sure you guys are familiar with the park, but just really going over this real quickly here. We looked at the entire park and where the best spot to put a shelter would be, and that kind of falls right in the center of the park. You can go to the next slide. Looked at in more detail of what that means if that shelter was in the center of the site. Looked at the existing parking lots where they were. Looked at the existing pedestrian access paths and how long it would take you to get to that shelter, and more or less the site circulation within the overall park. You can go to the next slide. And finally, looking into a little bit more detail of that shelter location just south of the parking lot off Main Street and what that means. And just, I mean, it looks like a fairly straightforward site, but there's actually a lot going on there, and things we'll have to consider once we actually start placing this shelter and its orientation. In particular, looking at the direct afternoon sun, we'd want to avoid any direct sun exposure on performers or visitors utilizing that space. And also looked at maintaining the existing circulation, making sure that was that remains intact, and aligning the shelter to capture some of those long views from those the existing trails there. Also looked at existing site features such as the bench and kiosk, the existing trash and recycling bins. Also considered a potential temporary food and portable restroom location. That might be something that people request at some point. So looking at that, just, you know, high 10,000 foot level, where the best spot for that might be. Also considered the potential electrical service and where that's coming from, which would be at the northwest corner of that parking lot there. And we've been in coordination with Madison Gas and Electric, and the supply should be adequate to electrify the shelter here and make everything work. Go to the next slide. We also did a, beyond just a site visit, we did a topographic survey, which we found no adverse conditions on the site. We looked at the ordinary high water mark, also documented the existing vegetation, and looked at all the elevations of the site. We also had our sub-consultants do a geotechnical report of the proposed shelter location, what the soil conditions were. And basically their condition is, their report documented that any footer should extend to the depth of the gravel material on the site, which is reached at 4 to 6.5 feet below the existing soil, the existing ground. They also recommended a typical footer depth of 48 inches, which is pretty standard. That would ensure that there's no frost heave. And the report also documented the proper subgrade preparation that should be below the shelter, so that concrete pad that it would sit on top of. Go to the next slide. And I'll turn it over here to Parker, who can go into a little bit more detail and update you on some of the information that we've kind of looked at here.
Yeah, so kind of the second phase, as Andy mentioned, was the hydrologic and hydraulic modeling portion to determine feasibility of this project in the floodway. So the first step of that was to assess peak flows on Black Earth Creek at the shelter. Per FEMA's guidance and what's listed in the flood insurance study as what's called the effective 1% annual chance or 100-year discharge, which is what you would in typical applications. The discharge you would use for permitting purposes was 1350 CFS. But I did, after we talked about that August 2018 flood that the village saw, I did look for a USGS gauge, and there is one just north of town at the treatment plant. And it turned out the discharge that was recorded for that 2018 flood event was more than twice the 100-year discharge, so 2,780 CFS. And the image on the right is just, that's straight from the USGS gauge, and the scale is a logarithmic scale. So clearly, a pretty substantial outlier event. You can go to the next slide. There we go. So with that information, we modeled both the 100-year and the August 2018 flood, put those discharges in the modeling software, and determined water velocities of Black Earth Creek in the vicinity of the shelter. Not a whole lot of difference actually between the two. The 100-year was about 2 feet per second, and then the August 2018 flood, so that higher discharge was 2.7 foot per second. So not a ton of velocity, but it's slightly more for that larger flood event. You can go to the next slide. Where we do see maybe a more stark difference is when we look at flood depths, which was sort of step 3 of our impact study. In this area, we had ranges of the 100-year flood depth of 1 foot to 1.5 feet. And for the August 2018 flood, we had 2.5 to 3 feet. So, if you're just doing sort of an open air structure, that's in terms of impact, that's slightly more. It's, it differs when you have utilities and things like that on the site, but that's still, it's still a little bit more when we're talking about that higher discharge event. You can go to the next slide. So, as per the regulations, like I said, we have to get a permit and model, to prove that we aren't impacting the flood heights in the area. So essentially what's called a no rise condition. And we modeled a number of scenarios. I'm not going to describe them all, but we can certainly come back to this if we need to. But a couple of scenarios that we did find ended up working were kind of what we talked about last meeting, was this 40 by 30 shelter with 4 8-inch posts and a little bit of a cut slab in order to have essentially a flat slab or one with a slight drainage. And then we also had a 40 by 40 shelter with 6 2-foot posts with a cut slab below the bank elevation. And when I say parallel columns, I essentially mean columns that are in line with flow. So you can sort of assume that one column would block the other, which is sort of a common situation, or not situation, but a common assumption you can make when you have some redundancy in your obstruction to flow. And that, when I say a cut slab below the bank elevation, that's essentially cutting below the bank elevation. So that might not be an ideal condition if you want the site to actually drain towards the creek. But we do have a couple of options here, and certainly, this is not an all-inclusive list. The options that didn't necessarily meet the no rise are off by 0.01 or 0.02, but per the letter of the law, it's that's not an acceptable condition. So you can go to the next slide. And then, just for comparison's sake, I looked at the higher discharges for that August 2018 flood, and we actually don't have a scenario that meets a no rise for that condition. Now, the couple that met a no rise to the previous condition were, you know, it's 0.01 foot off, and this isn't something that we have to necessarily regulate to, but you know, we prepared this just for sort of a comparison sake, and sort of a, I guess, a realistic or more of a more relevant anecdotal view of, you know, something that people in the village are you know, that's fresh in their minds. So that's kind of a summary of that. So if you want to go ahead to the next slide. And this is sort of just kind of a tie back to the FEMA map on the left side, which shows, you know, we're right in the middle of the floodway. So that's just a reminder that we want to get to a no rise condition, and we feel like we can. So that, you know, the image on the right is just kind of an example of what the modeling output looks like. And you can see that the two runs are exactly the same. That's what we're going for. That's sort of the proof that we're aiming for. So if you want to go to the next slide. And so essentially some key takeaways from all that modeling we did. The thinner the column that we do, the better. The 8-inch posts with minimal decorations fared better than, say, if we did a 2-foot post or you know, 12-inch post or something like that. The less columns we have, the better. So, you know, 4 did better than 6, and 6 did better than 8. And then we're going to need some excavation of the slab to offset the shelter obstruction, which is, I think, something we were going to do anyway. But that allows us to, you know, by excavating sort of a flatter area, that allows us to essentially offset some of the some or all of the obstruction caused by the shelter. So go ahead to the next one. And then I just wanted to leave us with some kind of similar projects that I've been involved in that were built in the floodway, so we can see, you know, visually there is some obstruction, but once we do the modeling and submit for permits, with certain measures, we're able to show that we're not increasing the flood height. So the picture on the left is a dog park. That's probably the most, in terms of obstruction, similar example to this project, but we had to, you know, create some benches and fencing and things like that and show that didn't increase the flood heights on a creek in Des Moines. And then the image on the right, Snyder and Associates didn't construct this entire shelter, but we helped with some renovations they did. And this is on the Des Moines River in the floodway. So pretty big river. Another example, we have to show a no rise for that condition. And then if you want to go to the next slide, I just have a couple other examples that, you know, we're obviously not building a bridge here, but I imagine with the prefabricated truss bridge that's right next to the shelter, you know, this is a similar procedure that they would have had to do. And it's, you know, these are just examples that you can put a fairly large obstruction in the floodway, as long as you're, you know, providing detailed modeling and prepared to offset some of the obstruction if you need to. You can put fairly robust structures in the floodway. So that's all I got. I'll turn it back over to Andy.
Yeah, and that kind of concludes our modeling and proving that the shelter will work in the floodway, and working through that code enforcement and making sure that works. And really the next, you know, step here would be to go into the concept design phase and actually looking at this shelter in more detail and working with a particular manufacturer to make sure we can meet all these post widths and everything like that. And that stuff's fairly customizable from most of any shelter provider. And right now we're kind of in communication with a few of those to see if this is something that they can deliver on.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions from anybody?
I guess the bottom line is you're saying this is all feasible. We just have to come up with a plan now.
Correct. And this is the stage where we would look a little bit more closely at the final location for the shelter and any sort of, you know, accessory features to get there. Sidewalks probably going to have to be incorporated in the site somehow too. and just looking at a little bit more detail of those features and how it would work. And again, working with that shelter manufacturer to make sure that they can, we've gone through their off-the-shelf list here, and out of the 3 that I've looked at, they'll be able to build a shelter like this. But it's just a matter of getting their engineer drawings lined up with what our requirements are.
That's all I
So,
had.
go ahead, Jed.
That was all I had. Thanks.
Andy, it sounds like there's not necessarily going to be extra financial commitments needed to be made or things done that will cost extra in order to prepare the area for construction. I mean, it sounds like it would be fairly standard construction.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be anything extraordinary to get a shelter here. It's really just scraping the earth a little bit at that pad location, like Parker said, to kind of meet the existing grade, make sure the pad sheds properly for water. And I don't think there'll be anything that's too crazy on this site. One thing that we might want to look at in a little bit more detail that would have a slight additional cost would just be extra footer depth on the shelter. I think that's just a good safety measure. And based on the geotech report, we do have about an additional 2.5 feet we can go in that sand and gravel area to extend a footer for these posts. So that's something we might want to look at, but I think that would probably be the thing that's might be the only other cost increase that would be kind of out of the ordinary.
Okay, thank you.
Andy, do you feel within that service agreement that we've met more or less everything in that up to 2.1?
Yeah, I think going through these options with Parker and looking at the modeling, and I think the models kind of prove that the shelter will work. And now it is that point where we do start to look at what shelter we can get and how we can put it on the site to make it meet that code. But I think we've satisfied that portion of the service agreement, yes.
Okay. And just so the group kind of understands how we've written up that service agreement again, there was a kickoff meeting that we already had. Then we did site survey and inventory analysis, which I mainly just went over with you now on the feasibility aspect. And how it was written up was the fact that, and then also schematic design. So they gave us a few schematic designs within this. How that had been written up was that if the above criteria wasn't able to be met with what we elected to put down there for a shelter, then we were able to stop the project at that point and not pursue going any further. So it sounds like we're to that point, and just meeting with staff and having those discussions, we felt comfortable saying that we're ready to move on to the next phase, and that's more or less coming up with a design and engineering and furthering out this project. So I guess if all of you are in agreement with that or feel that that's the next step that should be done, that'd be great, and that can be part of your motion for tonight if you'd like.
I just want to ask Andy and Parker, how you would speak to anyone who might be concerned about environmental impact on habitat and such.
That's one thing we looked at in terms of it. When we put this shelter on the site there, we want to avoid getting any close to the creek in terms of its existing vegetation bank and everything like that. Per the village code and all the standard codes we'd have to follow, there's going to be erosion control measures in place. So any earthwork that they do end up doing for like the shelter base, there's going to be silt socks and silt fences and measures like that to hold back any runoff that might occur from like a rain event or something like that from entering the creek. And I think we're going to be a safe enough distance from the creek that it shouldn't really impact anything. It's not like we're going to be lifting up the turf and the grass all the way to the bank of the creek here.
I just want you to think about it as you prepare, because that might be a question people would have.
Absolutely.
In the community. And not just habitats in the water, but birds and Are there any trees and vegetation impacted that are not in the creek itself? So,
Okay.
so are we looking for a motion at all to move this to the village board?
Yeah, more or less, I would say to accept this study and move on through the service agreement.
Why don't we
Okay.
get the motion out and then if there's more discussion?
I'll make a motion that we accept the plan presented to us tonight and that we move forward with the service agreement.
Okay,
And
we have a motion to accept the study by Snyder and Associates and move forward with the service agreement. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion and a second. Any discussion? I don't know if anyone from Lions is on and wants to.
Kevin
Add-
Engling is on.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. This is Kevin. Yeah, thanks for the update. And I think you addressed a lot of stuff that was discussed in the last meeting. And as I look then at, some of the, let me see if I can flip this if I'm here. I'm just going to stop my video. Okay. As I look at some of the other items that were brought up, I'm wondering if it's still in scope to go back and do some of those same analysis if when we get into the conceptual design, sorry, not conceptual design, actual renderings and looking at structure options. One of the questions that was brought up is, through some of the mitigation that you guys talked about, to address the flow issues, can those columns be wrapped 4 versus 6 versus 8? If through that process, the flow analysis will be done again to find where that tolerance is in some of the decorative. If we were to go for steel posts, can you wrap those in a 2x2 brick column, 4 feet up, things like that. But that would then take, again, another analysis based on now the widened, where I'm going with this. So that would be one question. And then the other question or comment, I guess it would be is, if some type of FAQs could be started now. I think a lot of great questions are being brought up, and those are the same questions that the Lions, let alone the public, and I'm guessing the village board are going to have. So some of the questions that have been addressed in the last 2 meetings, maybe I'm not sure who that is, but maybe those could start to be compiled. At least then they're documented and everyone's working from the same FAQ list. So that's it for me. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, I could answer that first question. That's definitely
Yeah.
something we're going to look at is post size, and if there is room to add in some veneer to dress them up. I think that's, if that looks like an option we want to consider, we can definitely look at these models again to make sure it's going to work. And I think regardless, if we put down 8-inch posts, we're going to look at this study again to make sure whatever we're building out there is going to work. It's not these, I think these numbers that we looked at, we looked at basic dimensions of shelters of kind of what was listed in the village notes and from some of the studies and what the Lions Club provided, and as a starting point here. And we're definitely going to look at this stuff again in terms of, yep, it's still meeting all those thresholds.
Yeah, Andy, just to piggyback off of that, we'll have to in order to get a permit. So I mean,
Yep.
the nice thing about doing all this stuff on the front end is that it's it's really simple to add different scenarios in this type of model. It takes me probably 5 minutes to set up a new one. So we'll have to revisit it, and if there are other scenarios we need to run, it's not, it's not a difficult process at all. Hard part was getting the model set up. So now that it's golden, we can roll with it pretty quick.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Andy or Parker, can you pull together some sort of a frequently asked questions type of thing for the next, for reference at the village board.
Yeah.
And how many designs would you be bringing forward as you work through this? Are you going to be looking at 2 or 3 different options, or how does that process work?
Well, I think it's the shelter is going to kind of fall in one spot, and we'll come up with a concept. Again, there might be an accessory sidewalk to get up to like the rear of the shelter where I think that we'll need regardless for ADA route and someone's hauling something up there. And that's something that we can easily shift around. But I think that where the concepts will come in to play more and more is what Kevin mentioned in terms of, let's look at this shelter, let's look at it with a veneer wrapped around it, let's look at that shelter. And I think our next step here would be to get some shelter options out there and get a price tag on them. So you guys can kind of review that as a whole and see what options you have in terms of cost, and maybe that's one way to approach this basic concept at the beginning here.
Sounds good.
Yeah, Mike, sorry, one more question. So from a timeline perspective, what, if we're moving forward, can you just kind of talk to what you see as the process and relative timeline that we'd be looking at with these? Because as we talked about funding and capital fundraising and garnering, community and village support, the one thing that I want to be thinking about right now is kind of our main fundraising event, which has been Trout Days, right? And this was one of the catalysts of the last 3 years of fundraising for this legacy project for us. And as we now get into the season of us putting together, whether we're going to gather or not, we still do a raffle, we still reach out to businesses, we still talk to community to garner, again, support for the Lions Legacy Foundation, which this is what we're contributing to. So I just want to be pretty solid in what I bring back to the Lions on the timeline, assuming things are going to progress and we're going to get a yay vote from this group and the village board. What would we be looking at for renderings and so on? Or is that too early to tell?
I mean, I can let Andy kind of take that if he wants to a little bit. I mean, just looking over, where we're at in regards to the service agreement.
Yeah.
Trout Days being, early May. I think that we would, I don't want to speak out of turn here, I guess, with Andy, but just by looking over the things that need to be done, I think that seems pretty feasible for some rendered drawings. Is that correct, Andy?
Yeah, I don't think that would be a problem at all to get some marketing graphics out there for you guys by early May. And that was part of our service agreement too, was to issue some drawings like that for fundraising efforts.
Yeah. I think it'd be more, Kevin, the only thing that would really slow all this down is if we aren't able to come up with what it should look like, right? Or what it could look like.
Yeah.
Which has kind of been the biggest issue or hamper up to this point anyway. So I think this is in the right direction. It gives us more of understanding, the engineering side of things, which should, really hopefully give people more, allow them to get behind the project a little bit more, just knowing what we can do.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we can work around what done looks like, but the conceptual idea, if we can be a little bit more solid and show that it's a commitment now between the village and other, clubs and community, just community efforts, I think that will go a long ways in and of itself. If we can, but we still, I think it's really important if we can get to that point and we get to the next stage of this, is that the Park and Rec, the Lions, and the village board all are aligned and we're all talking from the same playbook at that point. And that will be, to me, a huge accomplishment and an exciting milestone,
I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I can't wait till we get there. Really. I can't wait till we get there. And I thank Andy and Parker for helping us get there. As I know they've had through a couple of these meetings now too, and hear the same kind of questions that we're getting or that we're curious of as well. So,
And I think, yeah, go ahead, Mike. I'm
no,
sorry.
go ahead. You're good.
Well, I just think I really am invested in that timeline as well with Trout Days. I think this is obviously a well-honored tradition every year, and particularly this spring is going to have a significant, even increased significance to the community. And if that event can have some sort of a hallmark like this project moving forward, that would be absolutely just tremendous. So I think it's important to go to be very robust in the presentation to the village board next week if we want to try to target that Trout Days benchmark.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. Andy, and you can kind of speak on it a little bit. He's already started kind of moving forward in regards to some of the schematic ideas, that we've talked about, kind of that we put in that we've discussed over time here. He's even reached out to a number of the companies, trying to get their specs and trying to get, their costs. So he's kind of worked onto that, understanding that, the costs of this project is the cost of every project, I guess, is always what people look at, right? And that's what you try and form around. So he's understood that, and I feel like we're going in a good direction to get that, right? To kind of get that understanding more of what those costs are going to be. That should be able to reflect more accurately on the project itself and the concept design that we're able to pick. So I think we're in the right step, and I think that'll really speed the process up quite a bit too.
So then, assuming that the village board approves to move forward with the project plan, is it, as I'm looking at the preliminary schedule, are we expecting to review some concept designs next meeting, March 15th?
Yes. Yep. That would be the plan.
Yep. Okay.
And he had a couple of them already, but I told him let's hold off until we can get all of them and kind of go from there. So,
Andy, quick question on, I know electric is something that we're able to achieve, but what's the feasibility of using it? I know in the earlier discussions with it being in the floodplain, having electricity there is going to determine a lot of what we potentially do there. Do you see any issues with basically whatever power supply we need, we can utilize?
Yeah, I don't really see any issues. MG&E will put their transformer stub at the south side of the parking lot. We'd run it on the bridge and then bury it in the ground again. And that way it doesn't interfere with any sort of permitting. Since it's buried, it'd just be a really small trench that they would dig from the bridge to the shelter. So its impact to the area is going to be pretty minimal. And then where it does become a code compliancy item we have to follow is how high we set it on one of those posts, and that's all dictated in the code, and that'll be shown in our drawings. So I don't think it's a big barrier, and it should be enough service from that based on our conversation to if you want to have a movie or a concert there, I don't think there will be any issues.
So I think that's one of the big things that's going to come up. I mean, those are the ideas that's been floated out, people using it for birthday parties and concerts and bands, and, making sure that we've got enough power supply to manage all that also will help determine what they want to utilize it for. So,
yep.
Thank you.
And that's something we'll rehash right now with MG&E to get them back on board with that, because we did bring that up I don't know, probably a month and a half ago, just to make sure it would work. And we wanted to make sure there was a supply source that was ready for the shelter.
Yeah, one last comment, and then I promise I'll turn my video off and hit mute. Is that when I've thought about that electricity coming over, it just something for the committee to think about if they haven't already. At that point, if electricity is over there, would it be used for anything else to enhance the park, whether it's pathway lights or anything like that? So something to think about, but I'm guessing you have. Thanks.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table with the first and a second. Motion to accept the feasibility study by Snyder and Associates and move forward with the service agreement. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes.
Thanks, Andy and Parker.
Appreciate it.
Excellent. Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Okay, next, discussion and possible action regarding operations of our recreational opportunities and facilities. Sorry, I have to scroll.
Oh, yeah.
Facility, am I missing anything? For the 2021 spring and summer.
Yep, good. So I had a meeting with Dane County Public Health, as you all kind of heard earlier, about what they're looking at currently with the new order, Order 13, that came into effect. And it mainly was just kind of our starting point of what we feel we're going to be able to offer for this coming summer, kind of what I talked about during my report a little bit. With the numbers that they are currently offering and with the outdoor side of things and the non-food, I see very limited issues with most, if not all, of our programming opportunities. So that's great as of right now. I feel like we're really being pushed into a direction that is going to allow some normalcy. There'll be some things put in place, some parameters in place to kind of hold hold us accountable and keep people safe, which we're going to want either way. But it does allow for increased numbers within our parks, increased numbers within our play fields, increased numbers on all of our surfaces. Some areas of question are still going to be team sports, and which is kind of why I have on here where we're planning to go with some of this direction. So we're kind of I've recommended to our other rec staff that we move forward with the programs that we were looking to run with some adapted changes to them. And that team sport opportunities are done all in-house, so we're not having them travel to different communities and be a part of playing other teams as of right now. And that we use paid staff and or some of our instructors to do more skill and drill type activities for those programs. And in my opinion, the only way that we're able to kind of keep compliance and make sure that everyone's safe within all the programs that we're offering is to have some full-time staff on site, at least being a part of those programs. And I feel it's kind of hard as of right now to ask volunteers, parents and people that are working and doing other tasks to kind of be a part of those programs. So as of right now, I've had staff put together some budget preliminary numbers for us just to kind of see where we'd be at with the current fees that we had in for last year's programming. And I've kind of went over the numbers a little bit, and it obviously is all going to depend on how many kids we get within that. The number of kids obviously helps produce numbers. And maybe Melissa, you have some more insight on this since you've started for soccer, you soccer this year, if you see your numbers down or kind of at a standstill, or are they really increased due to the amount of people that just want something to do? And so that's going to have a large barrier on what we do kind of moving forward. But I did plan to have no travel baseball or softball for the 2021 season, but I'll definitely allow more skills and drill type programming either during the day and or at night. So there'll be kind of two offerings for them. And then the only other change that I saw in there was that our summer camp could increase to a maximum of 25 kids, which was outstanding. Without having separate spaces for those. So once again, I just kind of wanted to bring you up to speed on what the order states for us. And it pretty much allows everything to happen, especially when we're not having food and drink. And tonight's discussion was basically based just on programs. So it doesn't have the pool in there, as you see. We have a separate meeting with Dane County Public Health scheduled for March 5th. With Justin, and he's supposed to hopefully give us more direction on what outdoor venues like swimming pools, splash pads and things will have an effect on our communities.
So Mike, one of your bullet points talks about other organizations or all organizations must provide an outline plan and policy for
Mhm.
hygiene, cleaning, and protective. Now, I'm thinking specifically about the pool, and you just mentioned that you were going to have a separate meeting about the aquatic facilities,
Mhm.
but Stingrays and Mac, how does, will that be addressed under the aquatics facility conversation? Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
that'll be all under, and that within the pool facility too. I mean, things I've already been writing down and keeping track of here is swim lessons, right? So last year's pool schedule
Mhm.
for me, I thought was phenomenal. It worked out great. It was probably the best summer I've ever had in regards to the pool. And I don't know if that's just because it was so much more organized in regards to like the structure, you know, or there was a little bit more downtime for like the cleaning side of things, or you know, less staff because we didn't need them there for swim lessons. I think that all played a big part in of it. Um, the current restrictions, the way that we see them in regards to the swimming pool, is going to be really tough still for swimming lessons. Now, I know some indoor places that are offering it in Dane County now, and I'm not so sure if they're meeting the restrictions that they're putting in place. And that's why we all wanted to have another meeting with Justin just on pools, so that we didn't have all Dane County Parks and Recreation people in on that meeting that don't have a pool. They didn't have to be a part of that. So, but there's a lot of questions with that, more about the barriers and how many kids can actually be in your facility. So those are outdoor facilities. It's saying that we can be at 50%, but then it's also telling us that we have to keep 6 feet of distance, in which when kids are either on the edge or on the deck, which is something that we could plan for. The problem is going to be, how do we meet our numbers to actually meet our budget if we're only able to do that? Just like other people were having issues with that last year of only having one person in a lane. You know, if you're renting a lane for an hour, or you're renting 6 lanes for an hour at $150, you only get 6 swimmers in there. Obviously, their fees have to increase. So that's what I need more clarification on from Dane County on what they're recommending, or what their order is going to be by May 1st. And hopefully by March 5th, we have more of an idea of like numbers, because that's what they're going to do all their orders based off of, is where our numbers in Dane County at the time, which will affect all of our programs too. But the pool itself is going to definitely, I mean, we at least already know we can open, right? We can open like we did last year, and we know that was effective and it worked. But are there other ways that we, you know, I would hate to not have swimming lessons again for another summer. I think kids in our community need that. It may be restructured or done a little bit differently, but I think it's to miss 2 complete summers would be pretty tough for our community. So
Mike, I have a
Obviously,
question about team sports, unless Jen, did you have something more about the pool?
no, go ahead.
Okay. So you talked about team sports and not having them travel between communities. I don't necessarily see that in the order anywhere. And I know with soccer that teams are going to be traveling between communities because that's where the teams are. So is
yeah,
that just a choice that you made?
no, those are things that they put in there for additional considerations. And
Okay.
so it's not actually in their order. It states that you should be limiting competitions to teams from your own community in their additional considerations area. And they emphasized that, you know, during our meeting a couple of times. And the other thing that we, you know, just with the communities that we work with, so Middleton, for our baseball groups anyways, like Middleton, Mount Horeb, Black Earth. So they're, you know, very close. Are they going to run their program? So are the numbers going to jive for us to be able to even compete across those lines? And we're not sure on that too, but
Sure.
more about, I want to get it out to the community right away. So if there are other opportunities for them, they can do it. Or, you know, are there things that they could see or want us to be offering instead with the skill aspect or skill and drill aspect, like we would normally within a team. I would love to be able to offer our own little league just in town like it was when I was a kid, but I just don't see those numbers really happening again to have at least 4 teams. But even if we were to have 2 and do the skill and drill aspect and run games within ourselves, I think would be at least something more than what they were given last year. And it still could allow for us to, you know, expand on that, providing some things change within the numbers too. But.
Sure. So Mesa,
Yeah.
which is that, the Madison Area Youth Soccer Association is going to plan a league. And so that will mean that teams will come together from within Dane County. It's basically from within Dane County, maybe a few teams from outside of Dane County, but there won't be any tournaments happening. Like they're not going to host any tournaments at Redden. They're not going to, because they felt that was going to be too difficult to do, to try and make that work and still follow the order. But league play is planned to happen at this
Yeah, and
point.
I think that's what they're calling for. Your league play, your league is made up of all these different communities, where our league is really, or like our teams in our league are from our own community, right?
Mhm.
Where, so even all the kids that play on our traveling league, we'll just say our machine pitch league, are all from Cross Plains, whereas your teams are already kind of mixed. So, and they've allowed that. So I think that's where they were trying to hint or
Mhm.
push their discussion a little bit more. But I have talked with Stan and Jim Nunn from Cross Plains Baseball Group. They're hoping and planning to do a full season under what's allowed. I've already kind of talked to them about the food and drink aspect of things. We've always kind of ran Mary's Place, or they've ran Mary's Place, but I really don't see the benefit of that. If you're able to make sure that you can have spectators there, I'd rather see that than have food and drink personally. So it's kind of the route we've talked about with them, at least to date, but they didn't have a lot of that information yet for themselves in place.
Okay.
What Jennifer was getting at too, must provide your outline plan. We have that already, so we're pretty good. We should be, everything that we did last year in regards to that type of plan, so hygiene, cleaning, protective measures, we have. MAC has theirs, that they had provided for us already too, that we'll give to the Stingrays for the most part. That should meet their standards and needs too. So for the pool side, we should be ready to go. For the recreation side, we'll just be looking to change, adapt those cleaning procedures and policies to meet the needs that we would need for being out in a park facility or in at a playground, whatever the program may be, that meets the same needs as what we would need for the swimming pool. So.
Well, MAC has participants from all over the county. And also, I don't know about MAC, but I can tell you Badger Aquatics, we have a Baraboo component to our organization. So anyway, it'll just be interesting when you get to the Aquatic Center conversation, how, if you want to adopt some, if not all of these kind of rules to that piece of it too.
Yeah. And I did meet with Emily Spahn last week about Stingrays. They had their first kind of meeting, sit down, and everyone's kind of figuring out what their numbers are going to be or what, could be allowed. But that meeting went really well, and they're going to look for more time, I'm guessing, than what they've had in the past, just to try and meet some of the standards. But I told her, don't set all those things quite yet until they give us some direction. I think as of right now, you can have the Dane County Public Health is allowing you to have as many people in a lane as you feel is safe, which is interesting because it's the exact opposite direction of what they've given us up to date. Is they don't allow us to make those decisions. They've kind of given those parameters in place, and it's kind of a one size fits all. But it sounds like from what Justin was talking to us about is that they're going to allow us to make that decision on what they feel is safe within our own facilities. So that could be very helpful when it comes to number of kids. Now, we've had it so that there's been, 10 kids in a lane. So I don't know how that'll be. It may be all of you to help us figure out what we feel that is safe and, kind of give our best effort of good direction for them as we move forward. But I told her we weren't quite there yet. So.
BAC has certainly really kind of loosened the number of participants in the lanes. We used to have super lanes. We used to do double lanes to space out the swimmers. But as far as on deck, it's you come 5 minutes before your start time. There are no spectators. You are maintaining 6 feet of social distancing. You're masked on deck. At least that's what BAC has been the rules, no locker room. It's really much get in, get out. And we have had timed meets, and those have been, orchestrate is like on schedule, like maybe there might be 6 kids, you're talking about thousands of members. We're
right.
1,000 members of this organization. So it's a pretty heavy lift, or it has been. So, and we did that last summer and throughout this year too. So
where are they swimming at currently?
pool time's hot. It's like a hot commodity. We, I was lucky if I can get my kids in the pool, like maybe 4 times a month, of course, in the winter because of the limited space, but we're at Edgewood. I think they just got pool time at Monona, Harbor. Baraboo, they're doing their kind of that component is, I think, their own. I think they're separate to all of this. This is just the Madison piece. I think Sauk is also involved in some of the pool time. And then they also, not that you care about this, but tried to supplement with some dry land only kind of clinic where they separate the kids out. But so it's, we also, Hawks Landing last summer. That's out in, was it like Verona? I think it's technically Madison, but.
Well, I know Shane's been in contact with me a couple of times already, because it sounds like the schools, no matter what, are not going to allow groups to come in all summer or school year, which makes sense if they're having staff and kids come back too. I understand that, but so that'll be more of discussion for us, hopefully next month as we get more information too of what makes the most sense. And obviously public pool, we want it open to the community as much as we can, but how do we meet the help meet where with it? I don't feel like we'll have any time left over that from ourselves and the Stingrays this year, so I already kind of told Mac that wouldn't probably be a possibility, but there may be some separate days that we could work something out, if Stingrays didn't need something. But now that they plan to have a full season of whatever that may look like, I'm guessing they're going to need their time plus some if possible. So, but we'll know more about that later. So,
need any action on this, Mike?
No, I don't think so. I mean, unless you're okay with, it's more about like, I'm just trying to be as transparent as possible early on and let you and the community know, like, this is where we're currently at with where, the order is. And I mean, we can definitely get more lax on that or change that. I mean, the only big thing I see is the no travel baseball and softball. And I was still kind of teetering on that anyways. But after talking to other communities, they're not sure what they're doing either with what they're offering. But I don't know. I'd like to see, no matter what the team sport aspect of things, we are going to run. It's just how it looks. What is it? One night a week? Is it a 6-week program that we do during the day and at night? Something like that. Or I don't know. We're trying to figure out what's going to work out best for the community, but also ourselves. So within the realms of the order. So I don't think I need any action. I just wanted you to see it and give some input if you had it, or tell me I'm wrong, or
Well, I think the transparency is much appreciated, Mike.
Yeah.
Very much.
And I thought maybe you'd have some ideas too. So now that you have this and you can think about it, there may be some things that you come back with next month, like, oh, should we try this? Or, is this something we could do? And hopefully I'm able to have more of an understanding about what programs we're really talking about within this too.
I like the idea of you expanding into the night too for hours in the areas that you can.
Yeah.
Why not?
I agree.
Hey, Mike, one question. There was one I had. It was about what I'll call the COVID questions. What would you, I thought there was somewhere in your document that just, that would there be like a waiver at the start of the season that individual signed acknowledging that if they had these certain symptoms that they would not participate in a given event, whatever they would sign up for? Or would you go through asking questions? Would the staff ask questions?
That's a great question. And that's going to have to be part of our whole plan aspect
Okay.
that they want to see. So normally within a team sport like that, you're asking those questions before practice. You're asking those, every time they enter your facility or your field or things. And so that's where it came in with like paid staff too, like making sure that we're documenting all those things. What we got from Dane County was that they really just want to see that it doesn't have to be documented every time, that those things are taken, but we have to be able to track, who was there, who was a part of that game or that practice. For contact tracing, just like we had to last year with the pool when people would sign up. So that's mainly where most of the discussion went to. When people sign up for the program itself on their registration form, we have a COVID release, but that's the legal aspect to it. But really the daily stuff is, what we ask even at camp and those things. So having a coach or I don't know, Melissa, how you guys are planning to do that? Yeah.
Well, last fall, we had a Google form that all parents had to fill out before their kids came to practice.
Each time.
Each time. So the parents, the coaches they took attendance, but they didn't have any questions to ask the players. It was the parents who had to fill that out.
Yeah. So that's a great question. And those are things that we'll have to weave through, as we get there too, in regards to some of these sports and activities. So
Thanks.
Yeah. One thing I found interesting is that the gator things that you're able to put, they are not considering them useful anymore.
I saw
But they
that.
did talk about being able to double them up. So
Wow.
they may allow that where you put it up and you can double it. But I'm glad we didn't get those. We were kind of teetering on those and the actual face masks. So we should be all set with face masks for next year as well. So that's nice. But yeah, that's mainly it. This order does expire on March 10th. So we have our meeting shortly before that. So we'll kind of hopefully get a little bit of an insight on whether or not, every order is always expired and then there's a new one. We're just kind of curious if there'll be any changes at that point. So I'm guessing there won't be a lot of changes in the March, and then hopefully the change aspect will come in April, where numbers are down or cases are down. It's kind of the hope. So I'll bring back next month the pool and give you an update in regards to programming as well. So.
All right, looking for a motion to adjourn.
I will make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second the motion.
All right, meeting adjourned. See you.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks,
Have a good
everybody.
evening. Stay warm.
Thanks.
Bye.
Hey, Mike, if you have any questions about what we did, I'm happy to talk to you about how we did our fall training, but
Yeah, that sounds good.
just let me know.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.